Hello and welcome to part 2 of why I do not agree with Yone being in League of Legends. I recommend, if you have not already, to watch part 1, as I established a clear reason behind me making this video series, and it puts into context the issues I have, which will aid in your understanding as you watch this video. On to our second topic of why I do not agree with Yone being in League of Legends, is Yone's in-game kit. The spoken word brings an extra dimensional layer of depth to the written word and allows the convention of feelings, emotions, and immersive atmosphere into the work. But even so, actions speak louder than words, and the representation of a champion within a game is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the written representation given by the descriptions in their lore. So if I were to introduce Yone as a playable champion in League of Legends, the first thing I would do is not introduce Yone into the game as a playable champion because he is dead. But let's assume he never died, or let's just resurrect him with a random excuse so we can actually give him presence in the game again. How would I make him? How will he be portrayed? How will the immersive experience capture the player's knowledge of this champion? What sort of kit would I give him? All the other details. Now hold on, character introduction is sensitive in League of Legends, so in order to bring Yone in, I'll have to boot Yasuo out. Or I just have to recontextualize Yasuo so that this excuse makes sense and we can have both of them. Or I can take the third option, being the Riot surprise, and just have both of them completely retconned into different paths, different journeys, while still being the same characters who they were when they were first introduced, but having both of them in the same place at the same time with no coherent lore or timeline being presented. In spite of the fact that both of them being present at the same place at the same time would cause drastic continuation problems, but that's not for us to beat a dead horse again. It's like when they changed their logo, they changed to under new management as well. League of Legends is basically being run from the outside, with fans making their fanfiction input into what they want League of Legends to represent as opposed to what it actually was and used to be. But in the spirit of entertaining the discussion about Yone's place in the game and the topic being his kit right now, I will disassociate Yone with Yasuo so that we're talking about a completely unique independent character. Or perhaps we can keep Yone in the lore and we're just going to make a new character in the place of what Yone was supposed to be representative of, but as a completely separate individual champion, separated completely from Yone and Yasuo altogether. And we'll give him a new name. We'll call this person Yone. So we can make him completely customizable to whatever you want to do. Right now I'm just going to make a placeholder cube and give him a Mohican and make him whatever color I want. And this is going to be Yone. And my new inductee into the League of Legends will have the exact same kit as Yone, who's a completely different character by the way. So we are going to have Yone with Yone's kit. Again, separate characters. The reason I've made a vapid, empty, characterless cube to represent this new character with this specific kit is because pro players, or players who only care about winning, don't care about the backstory or character details or what a character even looks like. They only care about how well their kit can function in the service of a team game and how well that character can win. So in service of players who don't care about the lore, the details, and just care about the team game and the playing aspect and the winning, we're saying all champions are just placeholder cubes, and this placeholder cube, called Yone, has the kit of Yone, again completely separate characters, but in service of the example and the function, he has the kit of Yone. So our placeholder cube Yone is being measured only off of the merits of his kit, and how well he can function within the setting of the game, and the actual gameplay, how pro players see them, how people interact with them in a team game, early, mid, late game itemization, all the nitty gritty details. And as a new champion, I obviously think that, wow, he's quite the gold man. But what struck me the most when I first saw this kit of Yone is that this in-game kit has been made before. Now, there's a fine line between inspiration and plagiarism, but at what point are Riot just starting to copy off their own original ideas? This is what I mean when I say champions are being made on an assembly line. Do you actually feel like you're getting new champions anymore? New unique characters? Maybe some of them have different laws and appearances and say different goofy things and maybe do slightly different things, but in terms of character and even lore and kit and all the other details, they're sounding so similar that there's almost no distinction anymore. There are so many easy comparisons you can make that they're almost the same champions. First, you get the slight similarities between an old champion and a new champion, mainly because they might come from the same region and follow a similar playstyle and certain stereotype of whatever character they're meant to portray. And then champions' moves start to be copy and pasted among the new champions. After that, we get lore similarities and effectively lore rips, where characters follow very similar paths just with different details. Then the characters also start behaving in a certain personality that is very indicative of the way another champion behaves, which is almost contrary to how the champion should be portrayed given their context. Then champions start to look, behave, and even act the same, and even start to follow the basic archetype that the original champion was meant to represent. Old champions are literally being repackaged, recycled, and resold to you, and no one seems to care. I suppose I am talking to the crowd that only care about the gameplay aspect, so I suppose I shot myself in the foot here. But nonetheless, an old interaction I once had, I was so hyped that a new character came around. I was telling my friend, yeah, this new champion has come out, and he just turned to me and said, how many relevant characters are there in Runeterra? And just like that, I immediately flipped my position. I couldn't argue with it. As someone who was once super happy and hyped and a yes man every time a new champion came out, I had to just stop and think, how many new characters are there until the game starts to lose its value and the champions start to become redundant? They were supposed to be special. You know, too many cooks spoil the broth. And this game is just oversaturated with pointless characters who aren't special anymore. At what point is the entire population of Runeterra going to be playable in League of Legends? And they're probably all going to play the same anyway. I'm not going to drone on about the Institute of War again, but it was called League of Legends for a reason. These were the best of the best. Only the cream of the crop were representatives. That's why you have a super crazy, high-octane, bloodthirsty, murderous assassin who represents the strongest region in the world go around and killing everyone in the Institute of War, because they were the best. The issue arises when you have too many new champions, is that there's only so much kit diversity you can include into your game. Eventually the new champions are either going to be complete copies, just better of the old ones, or they're going to have such outrageous kits that they make the old champions completely redundant. Yone is an extremely easy example for this issue that I'm talking about, but even reworks or other new champions clearly display this trend at work when it comes to creating a new kit for a champion. Getting back on track with The Unforgotten, we're going to be looking at Yone and his kit. I will either be bringing this back to Yone every now and then, especially as it pertains to him as a character and his representation lore-wise, because this is important. Hopefully his kit isn't radically changed by the time you watch this, but we'll start with his passive. He gains a slight bonus to his critical strike chance at the cost of critical strike damage, and every second consecutive basic attack deals 50% magic damage instead. So of course, him being Yasuo's brother, they obviously need to have the same critical strike chance passive. After all, they did go to the same sword school. So the critical strike chance wasn't a nod to Yasuo's skill and convictions as a samurai, it's more just the stock training that goes along with everyone at that sword school. Just because characters are similar and even train together in the same environment, you don't have to make them literally cardboard copies of one another, even down to the passive. But moving on from how lazy this is. So there are several champions who change the damage profile of their basic attacks in accordance with their passive, and there's some who already mix the damage type between physical and magic as well. But what's unique about Yone is that his is split between two separate consecutive attacks. So the first basic attack is normal, but the second basic attack has the damage profile application to it. Have we seen a champion come out whose passive consists of two basic attacks in a chain? Why, yes we have, actually. We got Set, another new champion. He's barely been into the game that long, and already a champion's been copying off of him. You think I'm joking when I say they're coming off an assembly line? They literally made a passive for a new champion, and then copied that same passive onto another new champion. Now let's look at his first ability, or his Q. And his first ability is literally Yasuo's Q, but with a twist. Credit where it's due, Bossman Yasuo actually can change the effects of his Q, thanks to his E, changing the effect of the attack to a circular slash around him. But whereas Yasuo's traditional third Q has him standing in place and throwing a tornado out in whatever direction you cast your Q, Our block Yone has him dashing in that direction while also casting a gust of wind that applies a knock-up exactly the same as Yasuo's third Q. We needed more mobility, didn't we? Sounds like a fine ability for Yone, right? But Yone's kit is just the applied Yone kit, and Yone as a character has a bit of an issue with having this as his Q, because as you read carefully, he emits a gust of wind. Yone using another wind blade? Hold on, if I remember reading Yasuo's lore carefully, and the whole hype of Yasuo as a character, he was supposed to be the only person who mastered the wind technique. I don't remember Yone using the wind technique in his fight against Yasuo, even though the fight only lasted 1 second by account of the lore, and apparently half an hour in account of the video. The whole point of Yasuo being surprised to encounter Riven is that he sees another wind technique, another wind blade. That was supposed to be unique to him. He was supposed to be the only master of it. What, is Yasuo like a master rank wind technique power, while Yone is only like adept or expert? Is this like Skyrim? Was the elder who was in the temple who got killed the only living non-essential master of the wind technique who you can go to for training? Again, you're just adding too many characters into the game, and then these newer characters start to ruin the uniqueness and the luster of the older champions, whose kit and playstyle were built around a set identity forged by the individual character. When you start adding characters, or especially resurrecting characters who were associated with an old champion, and then you copy and paste parts of the old champion's kit onto the new one, then you start to take away from the old champion. Especially when it cannot make sense. When was Yone a master of the wind technique? Why can he use wind? But screw it, I suppose. If we've gone so far as to actually resurrect him, we might as well just give him parts of Yasuo's kit as well. Might as well make them the same person. You know, I said I'd be talking about the utility and the details of his kit with regards to players who don't really care about the character and the details of who the character is, just how well they play. But when it comes to a character literally having the same kit as older champions, what more do you actually want me to say about it? At this point, he's just made to look good in esports. Let's just move on to his W. A cone sweep attack which deals physical and magical max HP damage and gives him a shield for all the targets hit. He can't fully be a copy of Yasuo if he doesn't have Yasuo's shield. I was wondering where they were going to squeeze that in. Hold on. A cone sweep attack that deals max HP damage and positively influences the user's health bar. That sounds exactly like Camille's W. Now maybe you can nitpick at the details of champions' kits and just how slightly different they are from one another, but right now Yone is starting to look like a custom-made champion, where you take individual skills and passives from other champions and just put them into one champion. I'm over halfway through the abilities in Yone's kit, and right now Yone has absolutely no identity that can scream individuality to who Yone is. So just keep that in mind when we backpedal Yone and implement this to Yone, an actual existing character in the lore. Now, Yone's E is easily one of the most contentious abilities in the whole game right now. I'll start with the obvious. It's Zed's ultimate, but it applies to every single champion he hits during the duration. On the plus side, at least it doesn't do as much damage as Zed's ultimate, but this is offset by the fact that it is not an ultimate, it is on a regular ability cooldown. Imagine if they nerfed Zed by reducing the damage on his ultimate, but to compensate, his ultimate cooldown was the same as his W's cooldown. Would you lane against that? Now, Zed's is targeted and it only applies to one person, but Yone has the freedom to attack every champion he hits with his abilities and apply his own death mark to all of those champions. Yone's E has him dashing a short distance and leaving behind a spirit form. For the duration of the ability, he gains increased movement speed, and any damage he deals to champions echoes a portion of that damage back to all the targets recently attacked. Upon activating the ability early or until the timer expires, all the damage will be applied to the champion's hit, and you will be dashed back to the spirit form. Back to our placeholder cube Yone, we haven't established his ultimate ability yet, but if we mix together all the previous aspects of the kit that I've already talked about, so we have the double auto attacks of Set along with Corki's bonus magic damage, we have Yasuo's Q as well as his additional crit multipliers, And we have Camille's W, which doubles as a shield and percent HP shred. Add all of that into an increased movement speed Z ultimate that can apply to everyone, and wow, we have quite the strong kit already. Now, while Yone has to dash back to his spirit form, unlike LeBlanc or Zed who can choose whether or not to do it, I don't see any reason why you'd pick either of those two to fill a role that Yone can just do better. Unless you're picking a very strict counter pick, it seems like Yone makes Zed, Yasuo, LeBlanc and all the other champions who are mixed in with his kit completely redundant. Now, I'm not an expert on the numbers and the details of how a champion plays, especially in higher level play, and whether or not they're a good or bad pick into certain matchups. I mean, you can obviously play and feel them out how they are, and you know when a champion's strong or not, but I'll leave that to the people who really care about just the gameplay, so you lot can argue about that amongst yourself. What I am an expert on is character presentation and character details, and the way in which a character is presented in a text or fictional setting, which is why I started off by comparing this to Zed. If you were to make an ultimate ability for a master shadow ninja, Zed's ultimate would be the archetypal ultimate you'd pick. Aesthetically and even utility wise, Zed's ultimate is just as good as you get for representing just how adept he is at his combat forte preferences. He marks you for death, slash, gone, few seconds later, and it's lights out for you. In conjunction with the rest of his kit, it was Zed's ultimate that really set his identity in stone as that here and gone shadow ninja that marked a single target for death, isolated them, and killed them without a trace. Adding another death mark into the game, or death mark like ability, especially on a character where it makes absolutely no sense, just sort of undermines the identity and the unique niche that Zed captured by having his ultimate be a representative of his skills and ability. It also feels completely out of place given that this character is meant to be nothing like Zed. It feels more like it's in service of just appearances or the utility within the game as opposed to in service of who the character is. Even if whatever silly demon is possessing Yone could come up with a good enough excuse for why he has this ability. Or heck, even if they are in some way related to Zed, it would still undercut Zed's status and identity as the evil ninja, the dark assassin, the master of shadows. The way I saw it is that Zed actually takes over your shadow and kills it, therefore killing your spirit, your soul, and in the process you, hence why it's called a death mark, and how a previously non-magical using ninja can somehow gain access to this special ability using his new shadow magic. Now, I've already talked at length at how Yone alone ruins both Yasuo and Riven, so I'm not going to make this a massive segment about how he undermines Zed as well. But I am saying this does cause a bit of an identity crisis for Zed, given that in terms of gameplay, a lot of the utility of Zed was the fact that his ultimate was so useful at causing damage and getting out. But Yone can now effectively duplicate this role and be far more effective in certain situations in teamfight scenarios or against tankier targets. Now this does sound like it's forcing Zed into the specialized niche that his kit created for himself, but then again now you're really only playing Zed because you want to, and because he's actually great at doing damage, and because he's great to play. This really does harken back to my earlier points about how newer champions are just repackaged older champions, just made with a far more superior kit with more utility, damage or more application processes, merging aspects of all the old champions into one super champion with all of the strengths and barely any of the weaknesses, mainly because many of the older champions were restrained by the fact that their kits were centered around a very niche playstyle. Is actually getting to the point where a lot of the newer champions are actively forcing the older champions into retirement, especially in terms of their utility. Now, I hate to drag the conversation back to a champion's purpose within the game, but gameplay wise, when the new champions start to forcibly take the places of the old champions, it ruins the integrity and the identity of the older champions, especially when kit and character were one, when the actual character and personality and skill set of the champion within the lore was played out in-game, and you felt like this was who that character was. And then these new champions, who in many cases have no business even being there, come out either out of the woodworks or out of the grave in this case, copy the old champions exactly as they were, only they do it better and way more usefully. You're completely stripping the identity and the great feeling that the game actually had. Yeah, you can still play the old champions, but who the heck are these new people? I don't want them in this game. I guess I'm speaking too personally on this, but these new champions really feel like they're relegating this game to a greatest hits album. When the kit diversity starts to dwindle, the new champions just resemble amalgamations of the older champions, just more finely tuned, way more utility, way more aspects to them. When the old champions were kind of either middle in the road or a master of one, these new champions are a jack of all trades and a master of everything. This forces ludicrous balance issues where Riot have to either buff the old champions to oblivion, which just forces them into a super niche, or we just buff everyone and ramp up the state of play in the game, speeding it up to the point where games are 20 minutes long and everyone does one hit kill damage, and the best champions come to whoever can abuse these systems better. And again, strip every champion down to a simple placeholder cube, like our cube Yone, who's a placeholder cube for Yone, and these new champions, particularly Yone, are starting to look very good, and much like an amalgamation of all the old champions combined. Before we add the final piece to our Yone surprise, I want to zoom out for a second and go back to Yone. Now, while I obviously object to him being in the game, and so far I have been extremely critical of him, I must admit that I do like his ultimate. Yes, I can give praise from time to time, even in the most rotten of cases. Stylistically, I'll always give Riot the credit where it's due, in that they really know how to portray an archetype in the most absurd and reality-breaking way possible. But that is the creative freedom one is allowed to indulge in when creating a fictional setting. It's a game, and it's meant to feel like a game, and the game's not supposed to be set in the real world, nor are the champions supposed to be mapped perfectly on human physiology, so you can make them as ludicrous and as crazy as would allow. Make them break all the laws of physics and make them as superhuman as possible. And when you play as them in-game, let the portrayal of the skill set and the champion be perfectly represented and defined by the person controlling the champion, and let the absurdity of the fictional setting flourish through the characters. But enough praise for Yone, flash back to Yone, and we're going to be looking at how his ultimate meshes with the rest of his kit. So Yone channels for half a second, creates a rectangular zone in the direction he is ulting, where he then dashes to the end of the zone. If a champion is caught inside of his ultimate, he teleports behind the furthest champion hit, and drags every champion to the distance of the furthest champion hit, knocking all the champions up in the process. On the plus side, at least there's counterplay to this ultimate. You can see the big box coming. But there is again a lot of mobility in this ultimate, and again, as per usual with all these new champions, the potential for team-wide crowd control. All wrapped up nicely with a high amount of mixed damage, and you have one of your standard ultimates of the new generation. I'll refrain from talking too much about the fact that every new champion needs a team-wide game-changing ultimate. One of the main issues I have with this ultimate, in conjunction to the freak of nature character Yone that we've created, is that now you've created a high crowd control team-wide death mark. Zed is good at two things. He has high mobility and he has high single target damage. What he does not have, and these are the areas in which he is lacking, is high area crowd control, or any meaningful crowd control for that matter, and high area damage. Now, I'm fully aware that 3 shurikens into a crowd of people is going to do a lot of damage, but he can only deathmark one of those targets, and Zed himself is hardly going to be stunning any of them either. It really feels to me as though if we combine this whole kit together with this ultimate that I've just established, that we really have the strengths of Yasuo and Zed in one champion. It's Yasuo's high DPS critical hit chance and bonus crowd control and follow-up enablement, paired alongside the high guaranteed mobility, in and out potential and guaranteed bonus extra damage from Zed. Wrap Yone up into a nice little character, put him in the game, and you realise, wow, he has so many of the strengths of all these champions we've established, and many of his weaknesses can be offset by his team composition, or by the sheer diversity and versatility of his kit. This kit is packed with so many individual mechanics and details, while also being very self-sufficient, that the kit functionally does what other champions strive to do with their niche, only better and in some cases far more usefully. Remember when all the characters in the game had classes, so they were easily identified as to what playstyle you played them in, and then Riot tried to pretend they were smart and make subclasses? Well, when you look at a kit like Yone, it blows all those subclasses completely out of the window. Can you meaningfully harass with him? Yes, from a safe distance. Can you assassinate people? Very easily. Can you duel anyone? Very easily. Can you dive backlines? Very easily. Can you enable and crowd control? Very easily. All he's missing is the ability to heal teammates. I'll be fair if more professional people who actually understand more of the details and numbers within the game, can crunch down how his damage works, how his utility functions and the cooldowns and that versus other champions within the same field. I can understand and respect that. But what you cannot deny is that all the individual details and kit mechanics of this one kit into one champion, with all its utility, versatility and self-sufficiency, especially on topic of this ultimate in conjunction with this kit, makes for an extremely well-rounded and all-encompassing kit that overshadows many of the individual niches and previous characters who were established in this game. And as I make this point, I want to stress that we're talking about a placeholder cube, Yone. He can be any design you want him to be. But the reason I'm talking about him as a placeholder cube and not a character, whatever, is because the kit is all that matters. And I'm especially talking to the players who only care about the gameplay aspect and the utility of the kit that they're playing. They will probably settle for just a placeholder cube. These players might also enjoy the sentiment that this kit plays very similar to other two champions who have very similar kits. But again, we're referring to only the kit, whether they get the W or not. And I'm saying this to emphasize that we're ignoring the character who we're supposed to be talking about, their backstory, their lore, and who they're supposed to be in the setting of the game. So if we get our placeholder cube Yone, and we get the placeholder cube for Yasuo's kit, and we compare them, wouldn't you agree that Yone's kit is better? In other words, that this is the superior champion? Now, it's obviously tough to crunch down and analyze all the details of a champion's kit within the game and use that as a clear representation of how powerful and how skilled they are in the lore, though you can make some great assumptions out of what is provided in the game, given who the character is supposed to be and how they're portrayed in the gameplay sense. However, in this case we are comparing characters who've actually had established lore history, and what we can gather from that is that Yone is canonically and verifiably inferior to Yasuo. Firstly, assuming Riot remembers their own lore, Yasuo one-hit killed Yone in their fated encounter. And secondly, he never had the skill or aptitude to master the wind technique. So what this demon who resurrected Yone not only granted him the power and skill to become more powerful and equal to some of the more powerful champions already established within the league, but also managed to teach him the wind technique. Where did that demon learn the wind technique from? Is this just a random justification for having Yone in the game and being equal to his brother, if not more powerful than him? So first, Yone shouldn't even be in the game because he's dead. Now he's back in the game because he just got randomly resurrected by some demon, and now he's more powerful than Yasuo? Like, what did Yone even do in his life? What are his accomplishments? He failed to defend Ionia, he failed to protect his master, he failed to best his own younger brother, who he spent more years training than, he failed to master the wind technique, and he even failed his last duty to Ionia. Heck, I suppose ironically, his best achievement was failing to die properly. So now we're gonna randomly revive this failure, include him into the game with a randomly explained and out of nowhere power buff, thanks to this demon, all while completely upending the established lore and its continuity, just so we can say, hey look, we got a second Yasuo now. I stress this every time, but it's more sinister the fact that this is an already established character who was relevant to the progression of another character. Now we're literally digging into the old lore and digging into his grave just to give him some random fanfiction power buff and random resurrection excuse, just so what, he can look good in esports? Is that what we're rating our characters on now? I guess I just cannot accept this. You know, maybe there's people who only care about the gameplay, they don't care about the characters, the lore, whatever, they will settle for the placeholder cubes. Maybe they'll be completely fine with this, they probably don't care anyway. And there's probably the other people who were just started reading the lore yesterday, and were probably just born yesterday as well, who clap gleefully and just seal clap along with this because it's just entertainment to them. They think they're getting the deepest lore reveal out of this, even though it completely contradicts itself. They'll be completely happy with this. But I guess I just won't accept this. I just won't agree with Yone being in the game, especially not in this current state, with the champions around him especially with what the lore had already built up about this character and the progression he was involved in. Like, if I watch Yasuo lose a 1v1 to Yone in-game, I will just think, what has the lore come to? What has the game come to? Of all the matchups that should be one-sided, no matter what, Yone will never beat Yasuo. But here we are. But back on topic of strictly talking about champions' kits, it really does feel like the old champions are just having bits and pieces of their kits torn out and meshed together into one super champion, and that's going to be the new creative direction for our game. But to bring the conversation back to also talking about the champions as characters within a setting, many of the new champions offer extremely little in terms of actually building up on the setting or lore of the game, and the only champions that do are ones that completely upend the lore and revert many character developments that happened along the way, while many champions who aren't actually meaningful in any way to any significant characters, places or lore events feel like they were added to meet a quota or fill a vanity project. You get one of two extremes which feel completely out of place in the original lore. You get champions who are complete nobodies in the lore, who were literally made because one of the creative directors wanted to self-insert, or you get a champion completely ripped out of a lore or event scene. Their only reason for being in the game is because of that reason. We keep them anyway, and there's no other reason that they should even be in the game. And more often than not, they have to have a direct connection to some of the already existing characters, which makes it feel really weird and out of place when you're playing one of these champions against or with another champion who they really shouldn't be with. And I suppose at the end of that, I feel that this is all just completely uninspired. Riot just really badly wanted to make a second Yasuo, or they wanted to at least add to Yasuo's kit or rework him in some way without taking away from the original champion. We could just bring in some other random no-name from the school, but no, we're going to use Yone because he was already named in the lore, but hold on, he's dead. So we're just gonna randomly bring him back to life. What better way to remake Yasuo in our own new image than to have Yasuo's brother? And thanks to our new development in our ideas, our mechanics within the game, the innovation within our technology, we can fuse Zed and Yasuo into one new champion. And why stop there? Why don't we add Set, Camille, Corki, and everyone else we can think of into this new champion? Never mind the old established champions with their own unique kits who we're taking from in order to build this new champion. Those older champions may just need a few up-to-date tweaks here and there, maybe a visual update. No, forget that noise. We're just gonna steal parts of every old champion's identities and forge them all into one new champion. Screw the legacy and integrity of the old champions. Heck, we'll just rework them into a new amalgamation of a champion anyway, completely devoid of what the old champion used to represent. You know, seeing the kits and playstyles and what the abilities of a champion do being recycled over and over again from old champion to new champion, it just makes me feel like there's a massive creative decline happening at Riot. It's making me wonder if League should really continue doing this. Like, League of Legends is completely fine on its own. These old champions are completely fine the way they were. Leave things alone. Leave these champions and the game to stand on its own merits. But, to spare you all my repetitiveness, this ends the second issue I have with Yone being in League of Legends. Thank you all for staying within the rage cage for this long. Again, be sure to like the video, share the video, and tell me what you thought about the video if there's any important points that I may have missed, and you can relate it to my opinions in the first video as well. Speaking of which, part 3 is about the greater lore implications and Yone's purpose within the game, and how exactly the state of the lore is going to progress going forward with such changes and additions. But until that video, we part ways again. Tally ho.